Welcome to the Feel Better, Be Better show. Today, Kate and Nevada will answer your questions and introduce new topics designed to help feel better and be better. These are raw conversations, but they will make a difference.
Okay, we're going to do an intro for a show that we just did. Done.
Really?
Really?
You're not going to give anything else?
No. Okay, today we cover how to be financially free in this world that is crazily debt behemoth. I don't know, I ran out of words.
That doesn't even necessarily really cover what we talked about either.
Not really. We're going to talk financials today, though. We're in our sports get up on our sports facility training scenario to talk to you about financial wealth. No, I think we had a particular perfect situation where we were trying to do some evaluations on some financial stuff. And we were doing some things where the person, do we want to do the person or is it?
That's fine.
I don't care. Anyway, the person was very embarrassed about their stuff. They were acting as though they were in a bad spot with it.
You can say who it is. It's fine.
You can if you want. I'm not telling your story.
It's totally me. I was the one who was embarrassed where it was at.
And it was funny because I was looking over the numbers and I'm sitting there looking, I'm going like, these aren't bad at all. Like there's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's something to be proud about on this one. And so I started pulling up some numbers and doing some like, on the average and median of this and everything like that and was sending them back to you and you're just like, oh really? Oh really? And I don't know, did you look up any of that or just take my word for it?
Took your word for
it. Take my word for it, okay. Well, I was
probably not a safe thing.
I was Googling. Yeah, you shouldn't do that. It's a bad decision there. But no, but I think it was just interesting because, you were like literally like, I can't believe it's like, I have this much in debt or I have this much in only this little in savings or this much in retirement or whatever. And I was trying to point out how, most people are. And then and I know you were kind of comparing yourself to me who has an 11-year head start on you.
It wasn't, but we were talking about our stuff kind of relative to one another. And it was one of those that it's like, when someone else looks at your stuff, you're just like, no matter what in adulthood, you're going to have to go into debt for things you don't want to at some point.
Pretty much.
So whether it was a good decision or a bad decision or a necessary decision, it just kind of sucks to have to admit like, well, life kind of got me there, and then have to kind of like be in a situation where like, no, things are tough because of it. And you're going to have to kind of grind through that in the moment that you kind of don't see necessarily all the other good positive things that you've built up outside of that.
Well, here's the funny thing. Like I could literally draw you a map of how you could go through life pretty much with no debt, but I don't think you want it. You almost need to leverage that to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
You could totally, bicycle your way to your first jobs to build up to be able to buy like a motorcycle to be able to then possibly rent so you could be able to make it to where you could never ever have debt. You could do it if you're that debt averse, but your chances of being able to compound yourself into something that's meaningful in that regard is really low. It's kind of one of those things where you have low risk, so you're going to have low reward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of...
Well, it's hard too because, we naturally want to compare ourselves to other people, but at the same time we have everybody telling us not to compare yourself to other people. And so then you feel like you're in this whole limbo of like, where I'm at, is it really in a bad situation or am I in an okay situation, or like, I don't even know if I should be worried or if I should be okay with where I'm going and how the trajectory is looking, or, different situations like that. Like, is it because I had a couple years off without a job that I didn't have retirement saving? Is that going to screw me over in the long run, or did I do enough stuff other places? Or it's just hard to tell because you're just like, it's just a number, and people don't necessarily are forthcoming with the goods and bads of their financial stuff. They like to kind of talk about it in a way that's not always the most truthful if they do talk about it. And so it's like you don't really even know where you stand, or okay, is this amount of debt make me in a really bad situation, or is it just a tough situation but I'm fine comparatively to most people my age? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's really tough. And you can find those, you can Google those if you want. But then you can make that argument. Just because I'm the same as all my super in-debt friends, does that mean I'm in a good spot?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really tough one to do, to make that conversation. It's an argument, and there's plenty of sides on it. Obviously, we're all trying to do less debt. We're trying to do more, assets and stuff like that. You just got to find the right mix for you. Now, first things first, every bank you talk to, it'll be too much debt. I mean, because, and that's the truth of it is with lending. Whenever you need a loan, they won't give it to you. Whenever you don't need a loan, they'll give you all the money you want. That's just the way it's going to go. That's the way all the numbers work out. That the best people to loan to are the ones that won't need it. It's kind of like when you have a great job, you'll get like 3 great jobs offered to you. But when you don't have a job, you can't find a single job. I mean, that's just, some people call it Murphy's Law, but it's kind of one of those things that the confidence and everything else is skewed towards those type of situations. But I think one of the biggest things that we were particularly talking about on there is is the grind. You kind of mentioned it a little bit. And we get kind of caught up in that. We're broke and hand to mouth and paycheck to paycheck and just, basically everything is nip and tuck and we're saving here and we're not doing this. And we're keeping here to be able to grow this little amount so we can be able to afford bills. And what you don't see is that house loan payment starting to come around. You don't start seeing those savings that you had compound their interest a little bit. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, if you're doing that, and even if you're not putting away that much and you're not paying off that much, still over time you end up getting a pretty big piece of the pot.
Yeah.
It's just whether you can keep yourself from going into debt all over the place. Now, your situation is also interesting because you were in a whole lot less debt just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think
but you took on some big risks.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing is like some debt happened from life circumstances where you don't want to have to take on debt, but you have to. And then some debt situations were growing assets and other parts of your life. You were acquiring assets. And so it was one of those that like, yeah, you know about the one and then the other, is it too much? And it just feels like in the moment is the working hard to keep things going and not falling apart, is it actually doing enough in the long run? But then when you look at it like, okay, well, if you were to retire at this age with the assets that you have and like retirement rentals or whatever, what you would get off of it puts you in a pretty good spot. Then you start feeling better about, okay, going through all the tough stuff
I was gonna say,
makes you feel better because you're like, okay, this is actually making a difference because I'm going to be okay down the road. I just have to keep chugging along.
Yeah, so that's what I did. I literally put your stuff into a thing and said, okay, she's at this age. When would you look at a retirement? Say pick whatever number you think it is. I mean, I would probably go, in the 65 to 70 range. Keep in mind, everybody usually retires earlier than they plan on, but it also, we should be living longer, kind of that whole. But anyway, so I did like 65 to 70 just to see what would happen. I happen to have an idea of what your salary is. So, I mean, anybody else can do that too. So I just basically projected it out. Then I ran into, okay, what if we had this much inflation? What would the salary be at that point in time? Mm-hmm. And I told you, I'm like, so let's say you're, mid 60s or whatever, and you don't have like your house payment and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah. And I go, how would you feel if you had like double the earnings that you currently have right now? How would that make you okay? And you're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, that's what you're on pace for. You're basically on pace to give yourself double than what you currently have, which we can all gauge where we're currently at. Now, you would hope that if you do well in paying down your stuff and acquiring assets and doing things like that, that you would have maybe not a big house payment. Maybe you still have one, but maybe you don't have a big one. Maybe you still are almost paid it off. You're not in credit card debt. You're not in all the other kind of other stuff. That's your goal. So when you get there, you're there. But you can easily project out, like if I had this much savings compounded out, I have this much, if I compound it out to this point, here's how much I would have. What would that return? Well, an average return on the stock, you can Google that. It'll tell you. If you want to look at a measured portfolio, maybe it's 5% or 4% or whatever you want to look at. And you can say, okay, I'm at this, and then figure out what is that dollar amount nowadays, and you can figure that out. I think it's a huge weight off my shoulders when I go, okay, I'm still on pace to be okay. Mm-hmm. I think it's the one that scares so many people is we can't ever figure out what our number is. That's why it's like, oh, I want $1 million. Is that enough? Depends on your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's $5 million? Is $5 million enough? It depends. I mean, what are you doing? I mean, if you're spending $400,000 a year, $5 million may not last you very long at all. So, I mean, it just really depends on your lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I think with it too, I mean, it really brings in perspective. Some of the decisions came at relatively good timing, but there's a lot of those decisions that it wasn't the perfect timing with everything. That doesn't exist anyway, we both know, but
Pretty sure it's always the perfectly wrong timing.
oh yeah. But just the fact that even though timing wasn't great, even though you may know maybe the interest rate or the amount of money you could put in or the amount you had left over for groceries or whatever might not have been the easiest or the best or the perfect, like it really made enough of a difference that it was okay. It wasn't worth waiting to get a better return down the road versus just starting.
That's the best diet, right? It's the no money diet.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was interesting because we had some pretty good conversations about the fact that it's just like it never feels. You have that stress, you have that worry, you have it built up because you just don't think you have enough. You're behind, you're falling behind, you got this, that, you got this, and you can't ever seem to get ahead. And then somebody comes in and is like, you're on pace to be just fine, right? Yeah. And you almost kind of looked at me like, liar.
Yeah, when someone's like, oh yeah, all those people who worry about retirement because they haven't put anything away, you're going to be fine. Like, are you sure though? Are you sure that I am? Because it doesn't feel like in this moment like I've done enough or like I am.
Well, I mean, but seriously, over the last 2-3 years, I mean, you've made a couple pretty interestingly good changes. So, I mean, you've had some investments that you purchased. We've also helped with the savings stuff that we started doing, which is hilarious because you're like, what could $50 a month do? And then next thing you know, like, holy crap, that's actually working. And it's like, it does. It seems so little. And then you've been watching your debt. You've been working on, paying stuff down, and you're starting to pay some of that stuff off. And I mean, it's amazing. It's just, it's such little cuts to kill the big bad, whatever it is. You just got to chug, and chip away.
Yeah. I just think it's an interesting exercise for anybody out there, even if you don't have anything, just see where you're at. See where you start and then have your goals of where you want to go. And then, I think it's a good thing every year to sit down and reassess where you're at because it changes a lot.
Well, those
changes a lot and you don't realize it.
Yeah, those would be the things I would recommend. Most people, like I said, can judge where they're currently at. So if you're wherever you're currently at, say, okay, if you're in a house and you're working on paying down your house, or you assume that you will, go ahead and say, okay, if I don't have that housing, what would be a nice, comfortable living? If I don't have the student loans, if I don't have the credit card debts, what would be a nice salary for me to make to be able to survive and do what I want to do? If you want to travel a little bit, pad it a little bit more, do whatever you need to do. Get that number, then get an idea of how many years out it would be, and figure out what that inflation, what that amount should be. So let's say you're making, pull numbers out of my whatever, you're making 100,000 right now, and you got like 20 years before you're gonna retire or whatever, 30 years or something like that. So you need to have it be, 250,000, which sounds like an insane amount to make, but you're also making $100,000. So keep that in mind, which it depends on where you live. That may be a lot, maybe a little. So at that point, how much is, say you want to do a 5% return, how much do you have savings for that $250,000? It's pretty easy. Divide by 0.05. Boom, what's your total amount? Well, that's what you want is your retirement to be able to fulfill what you want to do. That gives you a good measuring stick to go off of.
Yeah.
Then
luckily, you don't have to be good at these numbers. You can go look them all up. They have calculators and all kinds of things online.
Yeah, online calculators, knock yourself out. And then you can literally do it. Like, okay, I'm this age. I want to get to this dollar amount by this age or whatever, based on a whatever return. I mean, they'll ask you in the calculators, and they'll tell you exactly how much you need to save a month or save a year. Then you can take it by a month. If you want to take it by a week, go to a week or whatever. Just be like, I need to save $17 a week or something like that. Guess what? Now you have your exact plan. There you go.
Yep.
And with that, I'm ready to go spend money now. What about you?
All the money.
Like
all the money I don't have in my bank account.
Blow it all. Credit cards. Yeah.
I got actually onto my bank account today, and I had more in there than I usually do, which is opposite of what you usually
What did you
think.
do with yourself?
I was just like, oh man, there's more in there than I thought I had in there. That's awesome. That never happens when I look at this account.
I need to borrow some money. Yeah.
Don't have that much.
All right. You guys all have a good one.
Thank you for watching Kate and Nevada. Hope you've enjoyed this show and found it useful and empowering. If you have any questions or comments, please contact them at Kinetics.com. That's KNETICX.com. They're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well. And please write a review of the show. Kate and Nevada appreciate hearing the feedback, and they welcome your reviews, and your word of mouth will help others learn how to feel better and be better.